Okay. All right, then let's just start. And
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Well, I wanted to share something because I think your view of it would be very helpful. And it's like I've had kind of a couple of good weeks and a really...
Hello, Mike.
yeah, go and carry on.
I had a really difficult week this last week, and I'm wondering whether it's my own fault, really. And just a bit of background, because I'm kind of pretty much on my own here. I've been doing some benches of 3 for the church, and because I've done it kind of myself, Father, and Jesus have sat down on a bench of 3, which has been very helpful.
Hello, Mike.
And then going to the Court of Strategy and releasing a strategy. And then the Court of Angels and releasing angels and the strategy, you know, on the fellowship meetings.
Can you hear me, Mike?
Okay, hang on a minute. Yeah, Patrick, yeah. Okay, go on, carry on.
Yeah, so that was one was a kind of an inter-church annual celebration, and I was leading the worship at that particular meeting. And in the Court of Strategy, the Court of War, we developed a big, a heavenly bomb of some kind. Later, and it was a great event once we started. It was like just a brilliant kind of atmosphere, lots of things happening. And afterwards, Father called it the unity bomb. So that was really a good experience. So then I did another kind of love bomb thing the week after, but from a bench of 3. And again, and this was just for our church, and all sorts of great things were happening, healings were happening, and great atmosphere, the sense of the angelic, you know, so really good. This Sunday, I was leading worship because the main worship leader was away. And at the beginning of the week, started to have a really difficult time. I was coming down with a cold. So I did a bench of 3 on that and saw something of the enemy which needed dealing with. And again, from the Court of Strategy, dealt with several things against that attack. So I was recovering towards Friday, but then I got bitten by a fly, and it started to get infected on my hand, you know, because I'm a guitarist. It was quite sore. So I ended up on antibiotics and feeling very oppressed and down. And I wonder whether the successes with the bench of 3 and the different courts was just releasing something from heaven. This time, I wonder whether I've been drawn into a battle on the wrong battlefield. You know, even though heaven's responded and I've been seeing things, I've more directly dealt with the enemy this time rather than, you know, just looking for something positive from the kingdom of heaven, from heaven to the... So it's been a really difficult week where I've been really very tired, very heavily oppressed, and a couple of sicknesses. And I wonder whether I'm kind of trying to do things old style, even though I'm engaged in heaven and seeking the mind of God, you know, and a strategy. Because I directly kind of countered an attack, dealt with the enemy, and then all my attention was dealing with that, really. Does that kind of make sense? And I'm wondering whether I've got something wrong, whether reacting to the enemy attacking me was the wrong thing to do, even though I did it from a heavenly perspective. It's kind of needless casualty of war type thing, you know. Whether what I should have done was really just ignored that, let Father deal with it, and got on with developing a strategy. You know, whether I've created trouble for myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult to necessarily to pin everything down to sort of one thing leading to another. And sometimes if we do look to attribute it to something, then we could focus on it when it wasn't actually anything to do with what we were doing. I think, you know, I wouldn't see, I don't get a backlash for something I'm doing. if the enemy is engaging me, then I seek a mandate for what I'm supposed to do about it. And then only do what the mandate is calling me to do. And if that's to ignore it, then I can ignore it. If it's to do a court case to deal with it, then I can do each of those things. And if it was like, okay, I'm seeking first the kingdom here, so God, over to you, because you promised to add everything I need. So if I'm needing the strength, or I'm needing this situation dealt with, then I'm going to trust that you're going to deal with it. All of those things are all valid, so long as they're the things that we're getting a mandate to do. And I think I just wouldn't assume any of them is the right thing or the wrong thing. It's just, what is it that God said when we asked, or what did we sense or feel God was doing or saying to us when we were engaging with him? And you're right, you can try and do old things from a heavenly perspective. We can get into warfare from a heavenly perspective rather than in governmental authority. But that's not necessarily what you did. I mean, I think, so we do live in a fallen world, and sometimes we are subject to certain things that happen. And is that an attack from the enemy, or is that just the fact that something happens because we live in a fallen world, and then we deal with it from that perspective? If you take antibiotics to deal with something, there's a consequence to that. Often, physically, if I took antibiotics, I would end up feeling tired. Yeah. Which I did actually a couple of weeks ago when I was on holiday. I ended up with a toothache, went to see the dentist, and he said, well, you got an abscess. Now I dealt with it from hey, I'm not letting this affect me. But he said, well, you need to take antibiotics, otherwise it won't go. So I thought, well, okay, do I just stand in faith and sense, well, I believe in complete healing and wholeness? And I actually felt, no, I'll get the antibiotics, because that's what I felt to do, and, if I felt I had a mandate to say, okay, I'm going to stand in against this and deal with it spiritually, I would have done. But I didn't. I felt, okay, no, it's okay to get the antibiotics. And then actually I felt tired for a few days having took the antibiotics, but I still was legislating for, I have anything I need to do what I need to do. So although I may have been in one sense tired, it didn't stop me doing anything I needed to do, because I ruled over it, and was still able to continue, with everything. But these things, they are, in a sense, everyone's different. Everyone's at a different stage. Everyone's in a different position with it. And, what one person does isn't necessarily what the other person would do. And actually, if something like that happened again, God could give you a different mandate to deal with it the next time. Because it's always about continuing to be relational and dependent on that relationship, rather than assuming we should know what to do, when to do it, and then get into a formula or a pattern. It may not be that the enemy was particularly attacking you. It may have just been, hey, you got bit, or you'd been around someone with a virus and you picked up a virus. Now, in essence, do we want to get to a point where we are in authority and ruling in this area, so that we are able to not get viruses and not actually see negative things? And you got, I guess the example, would be, Paul, getting bitten by a snake, and it was like, okay, he didn't stop get bitten, the snake bit him, but he shook it off and it didn't hurt him. So there's a sense where, okay, he whatever was going on, he didn't stop it, or he didn't even know it was coming, perhaps. But got bitten, but then dealt with it by shaking it off. And that was a then demonstration to others of the reality that he was in greater authority because the snake didn't harm him. And that opened up an opportunity for him to demonstrate the power of God. Now, I'm not saying that you being bitten by the fly is an opportunity for the power of God, but it could be. And God can still redeem every situation and bring something good out of it. If we sort of keep that in mind and have that open sort of attitude to things. I don't think you did anything wrong. Yeah. And I think in general, I wouldn't give in to anything that I saw was a natural sickness that just happened or the enemy attacking me. I wouldn't give into it, but I would want to know clearly what it is I should do. And doing a court case is not going to do any harm. If there's some legal right that the enemy was operating in, then, dealing with that is a good thing. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there always is. I think that's the key in these things. Otherwise, we get back to there's a demon under every bush and everything is demonic and spiritual in that way. When actually we live in a world which is still groaning, and in a creation which is in essentially not fully in harmony with God. Therefore, there's times when we get affected by what we're living in, and we're still living in this world. Although I believe that potentially our growing in maturity will potentially bring us into a stronger sense of our authority, and then be able to deal with those things, and eventually protect ourselves from those things happening. But I guess we're all on a journey towards that.
It seemed to happen at the most inconvenient time, like there's more dependent on me, and I was feeling the pressure, and so it felt like an attack, but again, it could be just, you don't know.
Well, yeah, and sometimes if we see it that way, we can put on it the power of an attack when it might not have been, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the authority to be able to do everything you're called to do and not feel under pressure to do it, but have the supernatural strength of God to enable you to do it in the midst of it. Because, when I came back from holiday, I had this tooth thing. Essentially, I was speaking on the Sunday. So, I legislated for everything I needed to be able to do that, and no one would have known that there was a problem. So I think it's each situation needs its own insight and wisdom into it, I think. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
The other thing I was thinking about, which you may want to talk about at some point, I know there are other people here, is when you talk about maturity and then making choices. Because I've been thinking about living as a living sacrifice can be quite pressurized, because that means that I don't do anything unless I say, well, Father, what should I do? And you showed me today that that's not the case. It's like you make better choices. You make choices with the mind of Christ. And okay, we might make some bad choices, but we're always making choices because that's the nature of free will. And hopefully the more our minds are renewed, the more mind of Christ choices we will make, and eventually be mature, so we can decide to do things. We can decide to change the outcome, or we can decide to heal somebody, or we can decide where we go in heaven, those kind of things.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, I was interested in some of what you were saying about being able to choose a better, like when you undid the lock, where you chose to see the lock in New Zealand, an open lock rather than a closed lock.
Yeah.
And is that something you just grow into, or is there a process, or is it actual engagements that Father Heaven would engage you in to teach you and lead you into that choice making? It's popping the quiff, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's relational, because we're joined to the Lord in one spirit with Him, and therefore we're being led instinctively by our spirit and His spirit in relationship. And anything that becomes legalistic, formulaic, or fear-inducing is an indication that those motivations are going to come out of our own understanding. And so, people can get in bondage to, I need a mandate. And if I don't have a mandate, I won't be able to do anything. That's fear. Perfect love doesn't produce fear. It casts out fear. So that wouldn't be coming from out of our relationship, which would probably be coming out of a mindset of our old understanding. So even though getting mandates from God are great, I have a mandate to fulfill my destiny. So that's an ongoing mandate that enables me to walk that destiny out, whether I have a specific mandate or not. And sometimes you get a specific mandate to do something. I have a mandate which is ongoing. I have a mandate to be part of Adventure 3, which is ongoing. I have a mandate to do various things which are ongoing, and I don't need to go and get another mandate to do that every day. So I outwork that mandate relationally. And in relationship, then I can choose which way I do those things as a son. It isn't so prescriptive that I am limited in my creativity. And that comes from knowing identity and knowing that I have, when I'm out working what God is calling me to do, then I have the creative capacity to do that in multiple ways, and they're all okay. I used to want to go to God every day and get a list of instructions so that I could know that I was doing what he wanted me to do and that do it the way he wanted me to do it. But as I got to know him better, I realized that isn't the way he works, that he doesn't give a whole list of instructions and specifics most of the time. He may do in a certain situation. He may give us some very clear things which give us insight and revelation to something. But generally, he's trusting us in relationship with him to do it as a son, which is why Jesus healed in so many different ways. He healed in multiple ways because he creatively chose to do it. And the heart of the Father was to heal. That's all he needed to know. The heart of the Father was to heal. Therefore, he had the authority to do what he saw the Father doing, which his heart was to heal. But he healed through the multiple different ways that he did it because he chose creatively how. So I think we're maturing to that point where we can just be free to be us in relationship and be creative in how we do things. And then not need to be formulaic or get into a rut of, well, I did it this time, last time it worked, so I'll do it again. We can just do it as we're inspired to do it, and that could be many different ways. And some of it's just confidence in knowing who we are in relationship. So many people, I think, get caught up in the fear, and that fear of trying to do it right, get it right. And if you don't get it right, well, what will happen? Which is out of the old mindset of the sort of God, distant God who is waiting for us to get it wrong so he can discipline us, rather than the loving Father, Son, and Spirit who, in relationship with us, are wanting to continually to promote who we are as sons of God and to release us into that sonship creatively. And I think the more confidence you have, not in self, but in identity, releases that to outwork, and the more I know what God is like, the more free I became just to be me in relationship with him. Because it changed my whole perception of how he does things and how he looks at things and how he relates to me and how that affects what I do and how I do it. And my reaction to God showing me all the choices was, well, which one's right?
Yeah.
His reaction was, they're all right. Because you're standing here with me, looking at all the choices in relationship with me. So I'm like, okay, that so frees me then. You know, because why did I want to get it right? Well, that can be the right thing of I want to make sure I'm pleasing God and do it, but I want to make sure I don't appease him. If I have the mindset I have to appease him by getting it right, then I'm coming from an old mind, which needs renewing. And I very clearly had that, because that was my question: which one's right? And he looked at me with a knowing look, which meant I knew that I'd just said something which he was now going to challenge me over in the nicest possible way, because I realized, my motivation for that question was I wanted to get it right because, and of course, then it was easy to address that then, because I recognized it, and it was just like, all these choices are right. That frees me. Then when I see a situation like, okay, here's a lock, how do I deal with that? I just have to be instinctive in how I deal with it. And that could be I ask an angel to deal with it, or in this instance, I chose the reality that I could do it. And so I opened the lock, you know, and that all happened in a split second. I didn't have to go and get on my knees and, you know, in earnest prayer to God to try and find out what it was. It was a split second thing. You know, a couple of ladies said, "Oh, are you going to send your angel to open the gate?" And I'm like, "No, I'm going to do it." Just as simple as that. In a split second, I saw the reality of me opening the gate, and I chose that and went and did it and opened the gate, even though it was locked. You know, so, you know, it's that flowing relationally that I think is how God wants us to be in with him, and not get sort of tied into the performance and the fear and everything that can go with the sort of that religious view of what God used to be like for me. You know, it's like, you know, I've been through the whole thing of that, you know, but now I met him face to face more and more and gone deeper and deeper. That's what informs those choices, because I feel free, you know.
The living every day is a living sacrifice, because that's the thing, is how does that affect choices? Is it maturing and then flowing out of who we are, and it doesn't take us off the altar because we might make bad choices and we're not a living sacrifice anymore.
Yeah, well, it is because as I'm in relationship, it's an attitude to be a living sacrifice, which means I only want to do things in relationship. That's the key to being a living sacrifice. I'm surrendering doing things independently. So that means I'm in relationship, and the choices I make are in relationship. You know, I don't assume that I'm going to make mad choices if I'm conscious of walking in the relationship. I'm just going to choose from the relationship, and coming from that place of peace and rest, it can flow. You know, so I am a living sacrifice because that's the choice I make. And most of the time, God doesn't come and say to me, "Oh, we've got to deal with this today." Because most of the time, there isn't anything that's going to hinder me fulfilling what I'm called to do today. You know, if there is, then I'm open for him to show me. And whether I'm cognitively engaged in that process, which sometimes I am, I also believe if I'm sort of seeing myself figuratively on an altar, in a place of my life being incense to God, because there's different altars, aren't there? There was the altar, which was the sacrifice altar, but there was also the altar of incense. And so I want my life to be incense towards God, a sweet smelling savor to God, which is how he views the relationship that we have, you know. And so there's different aspects of being a living sacrifice, which, again, we just don't want to get into sort of a bondage to, or a fear to it. Because, you know, well, when am I not a living, if I'm not a living sacrifice, we can get sort of our minds go around in circles and get us sort of tripped up over it, when, you know, God sees our hearts. Do I have a heart to be a living sacrifice? Yes. You know, do I make that choice? Yes. And do I then flow out of the relationship that my lack of independence has? You know, if I'm operating independently, then yeah, I may well make wrong choices. If I do make wrong choices, then I know God well enough to know that he will want to redeem those wrong choices and bring something good out of it. So I'll learn to make a better choice next time. And he won't punish me or discipline me in a negative way because I've made a wrong choice. Because most of the time, the wrong choices we make are as a result of lack of wisdom and insight, not because we're being rebellious.
Yeah.
You know, there's a huge difference between a deliberate, chosen thing where we know it's wrong and making a choice which was less than wise, and I don't think, I can't remember the last time I said, right, I'm going to do this and I know it's wrong, because that would be a conscious rebellion saying, I'm going to do this even though I know this is something that would displease God. Now, does that mean that I haven't done something which could be wrong? No, but I didn't do it with the intention deliberately. I may have made a choice which ended up coming from a wrong sense of insight or a wrong motive or a wrong heart, but actually it wasn't my choice to do it. And then when God shows me that wasn't such a wise choice, then I can evaluate, well, what caused me to make that choice? Did that flow out of a wrong motive? Did it flow out of just lack of wisdom or understanding? Where did it come from? Was I acting independently? Or actually, was I just acting without thought? Because how many times do we do something without thought so that we don't allow the Spirit to direct? We react rather than respond to a situation. And often when we react to a situation, it can come out of something before we've had even a chance to think and allow the Spirit to direct.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
I think it's with having a lot of, now I'm retired, a lot of free time. What do you do with that time during the day? There are only so many things you can fill it with when you're not working and you have no commitments in the day. And it's interesting because it's been nice, Father, talking to me about choices in those things, recreational things.
Yeah, God wants us to enjoy life. He doesn't want us to be so rigidly regimented in, well, I've got to do this, got to do that, everything's got to be ordered. He relaxes in his garden and enjoys it. So when I've not got anything clearly mandated to do, I enjoy doing whatever I want to do, which may mean watching a movie, watching a football match on the TV or whatever. It may mean going out in the garden. It might mean going for a walk. It might mean getting my camera out and taking some photos. I enjoy life, and I do a lot of different things at different times without feeling in any sense that I need to be guilty about enjoying myself. And in fact, I enjoy myself whether I'm doing something apparently spiritual or something apparently not, but it's all spiritual to me because God has given me life to enjoy, and I enjoy doing things. I enjoy creation. I enjoy looking at how things have been made, so in that sense, if you have free time, is to do with whatever brings you pleasure, because God's created this creation for us to bring pleasure to us in that way. And I would never feel in any way pressured to, oh no, I'm wasting my time because I'm not doing something, I'm not praying, or I'm continually communicating with God. And if God ever wants to show me to do something, he's got my address. He can contact me really quickly if I'm doing something which brings any sense of displeasure to him, but it doesn't. He loves me enjoying my time of whether it's just resting or whatever. And often I'm watching a movie and he speaks to me through it. And lots of different occasions where it's like my attitude is, if I'm doing this, then he's doing it with me. I'm not doing it on my own. So if I'm in the garden, and you know, last week I spent some time in the garden over the weekend, and you know, I was clearing some things away and clearing up, ready for winter, and you know, because we've are coming to the end of our sunshine period, and I was sort of enjoying him being with me. Now, did we have a deep, meaningful conversation? Not really, but I sensed his presence, and as I was doing things, I was thinking about other things, and I spend the time, enjoying being there, not thinking or wishing I was somewhere else, or, I enjoy him because he's always with me, and sometimes he does give me some insight into some things, particularly gardening, quite often gardening, I get some insight about, things as I'm doing it, some spiritual principles sort of come out of it, because there's a lot of gardening in the Bible in terms of seeds and sowing and, keeping the ground right, making sure there's no stones and, preparing it and fertilizing it and everything else, So it is much more of a just enjoying a relationship, and God enjoys us doing things that we like doing. Okay, anyone else got anything they want to?
Yes, I have quite a few.
Okay.
I beat you to it, Laura.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. Where do I start? The Lord spoke to me, some months ago, and he said he wanted to give me a business. And I was like, okay, so the time had come now for it to start to come forth. And I started to get snippets of what it was going to be like, and started to download things, and I'm really, really excited. So what could I do to prepare for that?
Okay. Well, you can do whatever it is that the mandate gives you to do. So in a sense, I would be looking at preparing everything in heaven first. So if God had given me a mandate to start a business, what would I be doing in that business?
Okay.
Well, I would be using the establishing in heaven first of that business, because that would prepare for when it comes. And in reality of that, then you begin then to have a preparation for the things ahead. I would be going to the strategy court asking for, is there a particular strategy that's going to give me wisdom and insight in outworking this? Are there people I need to connect to? I'm going to call for those connections to be made. When I'm in the realms of heaven, I'm legislating and bringing government to see the preparation that needs to be done there so that it can be outworked on earth as it is in heaven. And I think that's the key. Making sure it's established in heaven first. Have you, called it into being? Have you called it forth? Have you created everything you need creatively to see it fulfilled? Do it there, decree, declare, do those things, and you think, well, what do I need to think about doing? Well, if you're unclear, then talk to God about it or go and get a strategy for it. But generally, if it's in your heart, if you're carrying it in your heart, if you've cultivated the desire for it in your heart, which is part of the initial process of anything that God says and shows us and gives us a mandate for, is to cultivate it and the desire for it in our heart. So then when we're in the realms of heaven, that desire is in our heart with us, and then we can begin to flow in releasing, calling things, decreeing and declaring, if you see what I mean. So it's very much preparation is the key to everything, you know. And if God has called you to establish a business, then preparing that spiritually in the heavens, you know, is going to bear dividends later on. And as you cultivate the desire, you will begin to sense the things within it that God has planted within you. If it was a mandate, what does it carry with it? You know, it's all that, those sort of type of preparation that you can do there. You know, have you daydreamed about it? Have you seen it? Have you chosen what it looks like? And that reality, have you birthed that reality in how you're thinking about it? All those things, you know, can be done because you carry it in your heart and you begin to meditate over it, you mull it over, things flow, revelation comes, insight comes, because you're engaging with the Holy Spirit in the creativity of it, you know, and then you can begin to then do whatever he says to do. You know, I wouldn't do anything unless something had been prepared in heaven first, because that's where the supernatural dimension of what's needed for it, the provision, the connections, the practical things, come out of the spiritual things. And then you can begin to see things clearly, you know, in it. So. Okay. Laura, you had something you wanted to?
Yes, first of all, apologize. I lost track of time. I was late. My fault. Sorry. I would be very interested, Mike, this morning, if you could go a little more in details about our mountains, our throne on the mountains, how we govern our mountains, which mountains we have, and in particular, if we have a mountains for a country. I've listened to everything you've been teaching, but I like a little more details or practical things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got a mountain in sense of representing who you are. So it's your position as a son in the realms of heaven is represented by being seated in Christ in heavenly places, and that can be in different dimensions, but it's still represented of your position of authority, who you are as a son. So you may have a mountain that operates in the kingdom of God. You may have a mountain that operates in the kingdom of heaven. You may be seated with Christ in heaven, now on thrones there. Now, the mountain is just a symbol of authority that you have. And, you know, Ian Clayton talks about having a mountain with 7 sub-mountains and 7 sub-mountains of those sub-mountains. That's 49 mountains, which that seems quite a lot. And that's just individual ones, let alone corporate ones that you may be connected to. So there can be a lot of spheres of government that you may have as part of your destiny to rule in. Now, the key is not to get overawed by it all, you know. And when I first sort of saw the mountains, you know, I was trying to go on all the mountains, whatever, not realizing that I could rule them all, because I am the mountain, if you like. I am the authority in that realm. And then that brought me a whole sense of peace, because I just had to be seated and flowing, and then I would rule and legislate each of the different mountain spheres as I was led to do it. You know, it isn't like I have a list of all the mountains I'm on and each day I go through each mountain and do something. I just do whatever I feel led to do. That might be specifically towards a particular mountain, or it may be that the government that I have where I'm seated affects all of them, you know, and just outworks through all of the spheres, you know, that I am operating in. Now, if you have a wider sphere, I don't believe when it comes to sort of larger governmental issues that we would be doing it on our own. That's why we have benches. You know, So if I had a mountain, I was on a mountain and a throne for the UK or something, then I would be there with others, because I'm never going to have the authority on my own to establish something for a whole nation. You know, now, what I do personally may have an influence within the nation because it may be flowing, but that doesn't mean that I have the authority in myself over those type of areas. I think they are designed for benches. Therefore, we need to join with others to begin to bring government into a nation. And, you know, there could be 20,000 benches in the UK or in different countries, because there's so many different aspects of government that one person or one bench couldn't hope to facilitate all of them. Just like in a national government, you know, you have all the different departments in a national government: finance, health, education, transport, you know, infrastructure, food, fisheries, you know, so many, arts, entertainment, you know, masses of different things, you know, and they all have their own department to deal with them, you know, but they're all accountable to the cabinet. And there's usually one minister that's representing those departments in the cabinet meeting, you know, but there's a department. So in essence, that would be like a bench of three, and potentially with other benches or mountains attached to it. So, you know, in detail, you just have to know where your identity, and know where you're positioned, where you're seated, and then begin to outwork it. And if you know you're called to a larger scale and you don't know anyone else, then you begin to call for those to be connected, you know. I think when we talk about mountains and we sort of engage with the thrones that are on the mountains, which is where we're seated, then, you know, there's the mountain of the house of the Lord, which represents the whole of all of us in terms of governmental authority. And some people operate with things in their mountain. They have rooms in their mountain, and they store things in their mountain, and they put scrolls in their mountain, and all sorts of things like that. I haven't personally done an awful lot like that, and just never felt led to do it, because I place things within me, and when I'm seated, everything that's within me is operating through the place where I'm seated in. But symbolically, I understand, you know, that the mountain of God in Zion, the mountain of God, has many different facets to it, and many different rooms and chambers, and you have the, you know, houses and all the different things that are associated with it that we can have access to and we can engage in. So the key is to be at rest, you know, and to administrate from whatever mountain you're connected to from a place of rest, out of the relationship, you know. Then you're flowing relationally with whatever it is God's in you know, entrusting you with to do. And, you know, are all those different mountains that we may be on separate? Yes, they are separate authority spheres, but I'm still me. So I'm still seated, and I can access all of them from the place where who I am, my position, you know. And I think if we see it as a demonstration or a reflection of our position in heaven, then we sort of don't get caught up in trying to do too much or trying to keep everything going, you know, because it can be quite difficult to juggle all the different plates if you're trying to do it from that mindset of, well, I've got to go here, I've got to go there, I've got to go here. If I'm seated in heavenly places, if I make a declaration towards the region that I'm part of a regional bench, I don't have to think, oh, I'm going to go and sit on the throne on the regional bench. I'm always have authority because I am in that position of government. Therefore, I always carry authority to it. And therefore I don't, and other people may do it differently, but I don't think about, okay, well, I need to go to this mountain. I think about, I am in authority. That's my position. Therefore I can administrate that. And my heart towards it releases the authority to administrate it, you know. Now, when you engage corporately with a bench, then obviously you're together looking to engage something, which from that perspective, when we step into heaven together, or when we go and do something in the realms of heaven or go to a court or something, then we're going together. And then I am then focused. So my soul and spirit are then engaged with where we're going and what we're doing together. You know, but I wouldn't, if I was on my own, and you're still part of a bench, whether you're meeting together or not, you still carry the authority towards that area, you know, even if you're not meeting together with the other two at that point in time. So I do things for our local bench of 3, and for that bench and for the Ekklesia here, together with the other 2 of the bench at times, and also lots of times just because I always carry that authority, and sometimes I make some declarations or do some things. If I'm speaking on a Sunday, then, you know, I will be preparing the atmosphere for that, you know, assigning angels, doing whatever I feel led to do. I wouldn't sort of call up the other 2 of the bench and say, oh, we need to get together because I need to do this for Sunday, you know, because we carry that joint authority, and we do things together, and we do things when we're not together in the same sphere, you know, because we do it relationally, and we do it from honoring each other, which means we release the blessing of each person into that, you know. And, you know, you can't be meeting as a bench all day, every day, you know, so you have to, you know, you have to administrate what you are doing out of when you have met, and carry on with that administration even when you're not necessarily meeting. So, you know, the personal mountains, you know, some of my personal mountains relate to some of the corporate mountains, because my personal mountains are about government, you know, so they work together and flow together in that way. So,
Thank you. Very helpful.
okay. Okay, anyone else got anything they want to talk about?
Yes. Sorry, I was still talking when Laura came in, but yeah. About the business, the ideas have started flowing in, coming through, and I see how it kind of like sits in with the mountain of healing, for example. And it's to do with natural and holistic products. And one of the things that I hate to do is I don't like taking medicine. So that really goes well with me. And together with the healing and yeah, there's some other aspects of it that I'm kind of like having to figure out. So yeah, thank you so much for that. The other thing is that I went back to the church yesterday regarding the dinner parties I spoke to you about last week. And the pastor who preached was talking about how, you know, well, it was talking about getting like to do the things that God is asking you to do and being accountable and that kind of thing along those lines. So anyway, I went back to him and said, oh, I spoke to you about the dinner parties and what is the position now? And he's like, oh, we're still looking for somebody. We don't know who's going to head it and all that and all that. So, okay, fine. I have done my part. I've gone back. I've gone back and, you know, responded saying, you know, kind of like a follow-up. So I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen with that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, to be honest, if you're in a church that's operating under an old model, you've got to suck it up, basically. I mean, you just have to accept that they're going to operate under that model. And if you feel that you're supposed to be there, then you're going to have to work with it. But that doesn't mean that you have to let that affect what you do for your own personal spheres of government. If God's called you, let's say, to establish a business, you're not accountable to the church for that business. You're accountable to God. You know, it's like you don't have to go to the church and get their permission to do something that you've been authorized to do. But if you're doing something under the auspices of the church, then you have to do it with the church that is doing it. And if they express that you have to do it this way or that way, and if you want to be involved, then you have to go with that. Now, you can still be you, but in reality, you know, you can't try doing something if you're within that church. You have to function within it, you know, which is why, you know, for people who are looking to engage a new way, it's very difficult to operate in a new way in an old wineskin, you know, because it's like you're wanting to release new wine, it's going to burst the wineskin, you know, and it won't be able to contain new wine. So it's just not worth trying to do something under those conditions, you know, because you'll be a pain to people rather than a blessing, you know. Therefore, you know, a lot of people we need to start new things. You know, we need to start ecclesias and establish ecclesias which are going to enable us to do things the right way with others who are wanting to do things the right way, so that you can learn to do it that way. You know, but you know, so many people are leaving church because they're finding they can't be themselves there and express what God's doing. So there are choices you have to make when it comes to working within a system, you know, and you can't try and rebel against the system, because that's wrong.
I think that's where, in a lot of my, like, I wouldn't say anguish came from, but it was that clear line that I've had this freedom, you know, working things with God and not being able to, you know, just this absolute freedom. And then all of a sudden he's telling me to go do this. And I'm like, okay, am I ready to go through that? And when you spoke to me, you said, okay, maybe God is wanting to do something within you to put you in that situation. I know he's talked to me about this, because it took time to build up. It took time to build up, and then, you know, it was kind of like leading there. And I was like, okay, I'll go back, and behold, what does this guy preach about? The very thing. He says, don't try to figure it out. Don't be afraid. Should I get it wrong? Okay. Like, okay, so I'm like, okay, here I am. I've said I want to do it, so you do the rest, Lord. Because I don't want to be pulling and tagging and.
Yeah. I mean, it is not. It's not easy to operate within a system when you've seen something new. You know, I think that's why Jesus talked about wineskins. You know, and it's like, you know, don't put a new patch on an old wineskin. You know, because it will burst. You know, so if we're going to do new things, we need new wineskins. You know, can an old wineskin be transitioned into a new one? Possible. We're in that transition process from an old to a new, but only if those who carry the authority towards that are the ones who are moving it forward into that direction. You know, you can't do it and undermine those who are there with responsibility in that church. You know, you can't turn a church into an ecclesia by subversive methods. It's only those who embrace the change that can take place. Now, you might be a provocation for that, and you might be an example, but you can't do it in the wrong way. And ultimately, I believe God will take people out of the coverings that they're under to bring them under his covering so that they can begin to start foundations of something new. Otherwise, where's the harvest going to go? God is not going to give a harvest and put it in the wilderness. So we need places that have crossed over and are operating from a heavenly perspective beyond the veil, so that they can receive a harvest that's coming. And I'm totally convinced that God is looking for willing people, not experts. And I think if God wants to establish small groups of people relationally operating in heaven to be ready to receive the first fruits of the harvest, which is going to come, so that 10 people can reach 100, and God can add 100 overnight, when 10 people perhaps have been spending the time developing the wineskin for the new. And it can even be less than that. So I think God wants to stir and encourage people to begin to start stepping out and looking to see a new wineskin formed.
I saw this vision in which he showed me like a congregation of people, and when they made like an altar call, like everybody got up. So I know there's something there, but I'm just gonna have to just rest and see how he does it, because I don't have any input to it, honestly, because just like you say, I would not know what to do with it.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else got anything?
Just thinking a little bit about our visit to Exeter. And it might be for me to email to you, but I just need to think about the itinerary when we get there, so I can book my flights and know when to book the return flights and things. So should I just email you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, just email me. We can sort out what it is. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we'll leave it there then, and